Well, hello again, everyone. Welcome to the Red and White Authority, episode number 15. I know it's been a while. Kevin has been traveling, and I've been a bit under the weather, although I know I look great today. So, yeah, completely healthy. Hopefully I can get through it. But let's continue. Obviously, the Red Wings are in the playoffs. They finished third in the Atlantic Division. They're going to play the Tampa Bay Lightning. Like we here in Detroit say, led by Steve Yzerman, even though he's not going to be playing. But Steve Yzerman's team, the team that he put together, team that's very much like the Red Wings. They're a pretty big team. They don't play real heavy, but they lead the NHL in scoring. Their power play is right around 15th or so. So if you look at it, it's going to be a fast series, an up and down series, kind of series that the Red Wings want to play. But Kevin, before we get into all of that, especially the goaltending situation where Mike Babcock, this is Tuesday, so on Monday, Mike Babcock announced that he would start Peter Mrazek in net, which kind of surprised us, and we'll get into that. I read a statistic today, Kevin, that out of the 16 goaltenders that are going to start the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, only 2 have won a Stanley Cup. Only 2, and if you look at it, quite possibly there's 6 or 7 teams in the NHL that at some point during the first round could go with one or the other goaltender. I don't think I've ever remembered the goaltending position ever being this unsettled with so many teams. It's almost unheard of with one team if you make the playoffs, let alone 6 or 7 entering the first round, which begins tomorrow on Wednesday.
Yeah, I mean, it is very unusual. The goalie rotations, as a general rule, coaches do not like them in the postseason. They want one guy. And I think it's a lot to do with the fact that the playoffs are a momentum tournament. We see it all the time where a team plays strong in the first round, they gain some confidence, they feel good about themselves. The way the schedule works out, where you're playing every other day, it allows for the momentum to build. And usually what that means is you have one goalie who you can count on, and that's the guy you want to turn to. And so and this has been the year of the goalie. Like you look around the league, like save percentages are up. There's been a lot of goalies that are having careers that are above their norm. But we also have some special circumstances. In Ottawa, for example, where you've got a veteran goalie in Anderson, but we've had the Hamburglar, Andrew Hammond, step in, come up out of the American Hockey League, and grab the number 1 position, grab the net away from Anderson, and they're going to ride him until he fails. And in St. Louis, you have 2 quality options in Elliott and Jake Allen. You have an injury situation in Vancouver. Anaheim has Frederick Anderson, who has played well all season, but they got the hot prospect in John Gibson, who is considered to be the up and coming star among young goalies. And of course, we all know what's going on in Detroit, where Mike Babcock has taken the younger Peter Mrazek. So a lot of special circumstances, but I think by large, I don't think coaches are looking forward to the idea that they might have to use a second goalie. I think they like the idea of going with one goalie. I don't think anybody's embracing the idea of a rotation.
I definitely agree with that. But it's I guess depending on what happens, maybe because a few teams are unsettled either because of injury or because of what other guys have done. I mean, every time we talk about Hammond, the Hamburglar, I keep saying I can't believe it's the same kid I covered at Bowling Green, because they weren't really good, But so you don't know how long I guess that's going to last. But it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. There's so many fascinating storylines going on with these playoffs, and I'm kind of curious, Kevin. I know that you spent some time in Pittsburgh last week, but the talk is that no one is giving, and we're going to get into this a little bit later, but I really wanted to address this right out front, is that nobody is giving the Penguins any chance against the Rangers. I think most people are saying that series is going to go in 5. I think all the other 7 series, everyone's saying 6 or 7 games. That one's going to go 5, and then if it does, if Pittsburgh's going to make some really big changes, beginning with Evgeny Malkin, that Gino is going to go, that they're going to try to shop him around. You got a feel for what's going on with that team. You've been saying all during the Red and White Authorities that, hey, look, what's going on is that these guys have been hurt. They haven't really had a full lineup almost the entire season. Just give them some time. So your quick take on that situation. I know you were just there. What's going on with the Pens?
Well, I would be stunned if they trade Malkin. I think that's a fan overreaction. It's so rare that you develop a 1-2 center combination like Crosby and Malkin. We saw it in Detroit with Yzerman and Fedorov. That's such an advantage that I just can't see them giving it up. I get that, that's, almost $18 million tied up in 2 players. But in this salary cap era, usually you have, 4 or 5 players that you're paying a lot of money to. And I think the same is true in Pittsburgh. And to me, Malkin and Crosby are still part of the solution. Malkin's been banged up all season long. I don't think he's been responsible for this late season demise. I mean, he clearly is not playing at 100% capacity. And when you look at both he and Crosby, like their points per game are still strong. They just haven't been healthy. Even Crosby missed 5 games, and I think that mumps took a toll on him even longer than the games he was out. I don't think he was quite as effective coming out of the mumps because he just felt drained and lacking in energy. So I think there are going to be some changes, but I think it's going to be on the wingers. Like Kunitz has had a really poor second half. I think he had 1 goal in 22 games. David Perron was a guy they thought was going to be a perfect winger for Crosby. Was hot early, and then he has 1 point in his last 10, 11 games. I think they're really pleased with the Holmquist, the player they picked up from Nashville. But I think he's really the only winger that's that they're totally pleased with. I think they're expecting Kapanen, to their number 1 pick from last season, their first rounder, to step in next season. So I would see there's going to be some significant changes up front, but I just can't believe that it's going to be with Crosby or Malkin.
Well, I agree with you. For years we've always said, and heck, I've told anybody. I mean, for 14 seasons, and granted, Steve Yzerman was injured, but the Red Wings had Sergei Fedorov and Steve Yzerman for 14 seasons as their 1 and 2 centers. That is virtually impossible to defend. I mean, then when you go and throw in a Larionov in the mix and then a Chris Draper, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, the strength of the Red Wings was right down the middle.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And other than Gretzky and Messier, name teams that have had centers quite like Crosby and Malkin, or Yzerman and Fedorov. Right now, you look around the league, Ryan Getzlaf and Ryan Kessler in Anaheim. That's a pretty good 1-2 combination, but for different reasons. You have the big center Getzlaf, who is a number 1, and then you got that big, strong, hulking Michigan native Ryan Kessler as the number 2 center. But it's not like he is Evgeny Malkin. He's just a good, a very good, 2-way center. So. It's really hard to come up with 2 superstars playing down the middle like that, and for that reason, again, I just think that fans are frustrated in Pittsburgh. They're looking for answers, and the easiest thing to say is, hey, let's trade Malkin and get a package of players. But we've seen you and I have been around the block, and we've seen a lot of those. Trades where you trade 1 superstar and you get a hefty bag full of players, and you think, well, one of them will rise up, but generally when you trade a superstar, you never benefit from that trade.
Well, let's go to the Red Wings here. I mean, they're playing Tampa. There's a lot of intriguing storylines, especially the Steve Yzerman connection, where he cut his teeth here. He'll tell you, he grew up, he became a man in Detroit, and obviously he's tight with Mr. and Mrs. Ilitch, the entire Red Wing organization. He has many, many friends on the, I mean, he's, Datsuk and Zetterberg are his buddies. I mean, he has a lot of connection to this organization, and we'll get into that because I think anybody who knows Steve knows that he's as competitive as can be, and he wants to beat Detroit in 4. I mean, he wants to probably just get rid of this as soon as he possibly can. He wants to Pontius Pilate Detroit out of the playoffs right away, man. Wash his hands of that situation. But with that said, Mike Babcock yesterday names Peter Mrazek as his starting goalie. I guess he was a little put out by it because it was such a big story. That was what everybody was talking about. He comes out and says, I know who the goalie was going to be before the Red Wings beat Carolina 2-0 on Saturday. I already know, but I'm not going to tell you till Monday. Well, Mike Babs, great guy, but the one thing you don't do is say, I know who it is, I'll tell you Monday after practice, because you leave about a 48-hour or 36-hour window where that's all everybody is talking about. So by the time you make this announcement, it's much bigger and larger maybe than it should be. But the thing, Kevin, that I really want to really emphasize and get with right here is that I think the Red Wings, I think Mike Babcock, and we've said this, he's probably not been the biggest Jimmy Howard fan over the last several years. I think they gave Jimmy Howard every opportunity to play himself into the number one role. And for whatever reason, and a lot of people think something mentally is going on with Jimmy right now, that, he just didn't do it. And even though Mrazek has not played a playoff game, he has won an AHL championship. He seems to have ice water in his veins. He's the guy we've heard about that if he gives up a bad goal, he vows that he's not going to give up another one or go out and win the next game, which 9.9 out of 10 times he does. I mean, it's a strange situation, but in the end, I have to look at Jimmy, unless he's hurt. Unless he's not hurt, unless he's hurt, that's a different equation, especially with a goalie. He has really no one to blame but himself.
Could not agree more. And your evaluation on it is just right. On the money. Like, they gave him the opportunity. He came back from injury. He didn't lose his job because of injury. They put him in there. He was the number one goalie. He had played well before then, and he simply didn't perform. But I also think that Mike Babcock was predisposed to, seeing Mrazek as a real attractive alternative. And, if you look at him and just size him up in terms of ability, Mrazek is more aggressive than Jimmy Howard. He plays out of the paint. He challenges more. He just looks the part. He does not ever suffer from a lack of confidence. He's almost cocky. And I mean that in a good way, because with your athletes, you want them a little cocky. And despite what Jimmy Howard says about, that he doesn't have a confidence problem, it's pretty clear that, he has had some confidence issues or, some mental issues to sort out. Like, the early season issue he had in shootouts and, down the stretch here where, he gave up bad goals. Mrazek handles the puck better than Jimmy Howard. It's like helping the defense. He can come out, he can play the puck. He really moves it up the ice really well. He's not as big as Jimmy Howard in terms of, bulk. Jimmy looks a little bigger in the net than him. He's obviously more experienced, but just as you mentioned, Mrazek has run the gauntlet. He's won 4-round championship. He's experienced the grind of a 2-month playoff run. And I think that was vital experience. It's not the same as the NHL. And then finally, his ability to recover after a bad goal. Like, his short-term memory seems to be perfect for a goalie. And by that I mean he just suddenly forgets that, he looked atrocious. But to me, the final straw, and I think maybe Babcock was leaning this way anyway, but, the goal that Howard gives up in the overtime in Montreal, on the short side, where, in a big game, followed by Mrazek playing the way he did in the final game, it was clear. Like, I didn't think there was, I think everybody knew that Mrazek was going to be the guy and that he had earned it. And, this was a fair fight. This was two guys standing out on the street at high noon, And Mrazek was better going down the stretch. So that doesn't mean that Mrazek's the guy next season. It means now going in the playoffs, Mrazek's the guy, for now. And you know what? If he doesn't perform, Babcock's going to go with Howard. Like if Mrazek does not look sharp, we're going to see Jimmy Howard. There's no doubt about it.
Well, there's a couple of schools of thought. I want to get to that in a second, but I really wanted to ask you. I thought maybe because they're playing Tampa, and a team that likes to score. Let's be honest here. I mean, they're okay defensively. They have some big defensemen. Like I said earlier, they're not a heavy team, but they're a big team. When I mean heavy, they don't. They're not. They're kind of like the Red Wings. They're tough to play against, but they're not real physical. But with that said, I'm under the impression that one of the things that I think Mike Babcock and the Red Wings like about Peter Mrazek is the way he's able to play the puck, and that he's able to start a rush out of his own end. Jimmy Howard does not have the puck handling skills that Peter Mrazek. And when you're playing a team that likes to press it forward anyway, all five guys are going to be crashing into the attacking zone. If you got a goalie who can grab that puck and shoot it out to somebody and start a rush the other way, you can get a lot of odd man rushes. And let's not forget Ben Bishop, although a great goaltender. And I remember him his days in St. Louis where the Red Wings usually seemed to have his number. But back then, the Red Wings had really great teams. But with all that said, I'm just saying that, hey, Mrazek's puck handling skills might have really put him over the top besides his play. I mean, that is a skill that not many goaltenders have.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, as I mentioned before, I just think that when you start listing all the attributes that he has that gives him the edge over Howard, that's an important part of it. The ability to handle the puck, and especially for a Wings defense that has been inconsistent. So to have one other guy who can move that puck out of the zone, and I've said this on previous Red and White Authorities, where when the Red Wings are playing well, they play a very simple defensive system, right. And it's as simple as the puck goes in, you got to get it out. Let's get the puck out. That's the system, and I think Mrazek is a big part of that. When the puck goes in, he can get out and play it and move it up quickly, and the Red Wings have the speed up front that they can take advantage of it if you can get it up to them in a hurry. The transition game will be crucial in this series because the Lightning are very effective off the rush, and you've got to stymie that rush, and then you've got to turn it the other way. And I think, for that reason, a guy like Mrazek who, can make the save and then suddenly whirl it up the ice. This could be a very entertaining series because the Lightning are much better defensively than they were a year ago. Stralman has really solidified the defense. Stralman was very good for the Rangers last year in the march to the Stanley Cup final, but it feels like he's playing even a bigger role now. Like in Tampa, they talk about him being a much more important player than the Rangers ever talked about him, even though he was very effective for him. So he's really altered that defense. It's a much more mobile defense now, and he's been more offensive, which is surprising because Vigneault is an offensive coach, but he's been more offensive in Tampa Bay. So, but I agree with your assessment that maybe the most compelling argument for Mrazek is he is just so much more better with the puck handling than Howard was the final straw for Babcock to embrace.
Now, there was a conventional wisdom, and when this was being debated, saying it's much easier if you start with a veteran goaltender, Jimmy Howard, give him a vote of confidence. If he comes in and if he pulls the chute and doesn't play well, then you can go to the raw rookie who doesn't know any better and throw him in there, and pretty much you just ride out the storm with Peter Mrazek. Because if you do it the other way around and you start with the raw rookie and he pulls the chute, he's not doing well, you have your starting goaltender who's played 45 playoff games. I believe it's right around 45 playoff games for you. Has not been bad because the last couple of years it's really been a lack of scoring or secondary scoring and some injuries to Pavel Datsyuk and Henrik Zetterberg that have really quelled the Red Wings' desires to win the Stanley Cup. That, okay, Mrazek, he pulls a shoot. You know, he's gone. He's mentally fried or whatever. His confidence is shot. Now you turn to Jimmy, whose confidence is probably shot because he wasn't given the starting nod. Have you, by starting Mrazek, not knowing what he's going to do, put yourself even in a worse situation if you have to turn to Jimmy because you don't know where his mind's at?
Well, I've heard all the theories, and there are a million of them that you could go. But the bottom line is, I'm sure for Mike Babcock, because right now he feels Mrazek gives him the best shot to win the game. And I think that's the way he looks at it. If he goes with Jimmy Howard, and Jimmy Howard is not good, and when he has not been good down the stretch, it's really cost the Red Wings. Yeah. There's no question about it. So the series is almost lost. It's too late. Like, you got to go with the guy that you think gives you the best chance, and I think you leave everything else aside. You can't worry about Jimmy Howard's mental state. You just got to believe that Mrazek is going to go in and win that game, and he's going to be your goalie. And again, I think Mrazek's personality helps Babcock reach this decision, because we know from his history that if he has a bad game, you can throw him back in the next game, and he's liable to be pretty darn good. He doesn't let one bad game, bother him. And I don't think that we do know that right now about Jimmy Howard, at least this season.
What does this mean for Jimmy Howard in his future as a Red Wing, or is it way too early to even discuss that?
Well, it is too early, but Jimmy Howard's going to be a goalie in the NHL. We know that, and I think it's fair to remind everyone that we've been talking about Mrazek for 2 or 3 years. It's not a surprise. This isn't like Andrew Hammond coming out of the minors and just sort of grabbing the net and everybody going, who the heck is Andrew Hammond? Who's the Hamburglar? This is a guy that was great in the World Juniors. Everybody talked about him. Has been considered a top prospect down in AHL for a very long time. Teams have tried to trade for Mrazek because they like him. He's long been considered a guy who was destined to be a NHL goalie. So, for that reason, I think it's legitimate to wonder whether or not that Mrazek might move past Jimmy Howard next season and be the guy. And if that's the case, well, then you're not going to want to have a backup goalie making Howard's salary. So, there are options to trade him. I mean, San Jose is obviously going to be looking for a goalie after this season. The Edmonton Oilers are looking for a goalie. The Buffalo Sabres are looking for a goalie. There are always a surprise team or two around the league that you don't count on, who could be looking for a goalie for a variety of reasons. So there'll be options for Jimmy Howard if they decide to go in that direction. But it could be just a situation like next year they'd be willing to rough it out and cater the same 2 goalies and see what happens, just to make sure that Mrazek is the guy they want him to be.
Right. I mean, Jimmy has signed a long-term deal, but it's not, the cap hit isn't extraordinary. I mean, it's what is right around $5 million, I guess.
I forget, but we can look at it while you're talking.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. And depending on what happens with the Mule now too. So I mean, there might be some options for the Wings to go. Kevin, let's. With that said, I'm under the impression that Mrazek's probably going to get the job done, or he won't be the reason why the Red Wings are going to, if they get eliminated. I don't think his goaltending is going to be the main issue. Again, I think it'll be a breakdown in defense. And it'll also be the, if Datsyuk, depending on how healthy Pavel Datsyuk is, if he's able to go. I mean, I guess the Red Wings catch a little bit of a break in this schedule from the standpoint is they start Thursday, then Saturday afternoon in Tampa, and then they have a couple of days off, and then it's through Game 4, it's a Tuesday, Thursday thing next week in Detroit, and then on Saturday they play back in Tampa. On the 25th, I guess, of April. So the schedule, even though it's every other day, they do get 2 games in between the games that end in Tampa and begin in Detroit. But today at practice, Alexei Marchenko is going to play. Kevin, you speculated that would probably be it. I agreed with you. He's a steady defenseman, not flashy, but he's a right-handed shot. That would give the Red Wings 2 right-handed shots in their lineup, which, almost probably is going to put a smile on Mike Babcock's face. But with that said, Brendan Smith, it's speculated because Mike Babcock didn't say who he's going to sit, but he said Marchenko's in, that Brendan Smith is still playing for the play where he claims he thought the puck was in the Red Wing bench and he was just slapping it out, which resulted in a 5-on-3, although the first penalty against Detroit was really a weak call. But how many times do you see that where the first call's the weak one, guys do something because they're so desperate in the second one, although I'm not saying what Smith did was smart, and then you lead to a 5-on-3. But Brendan Smith, odd man out, are you surprised? Because, he was one of the guys that people thought had made some strides this year.
Well, he did make some strides, but down the stretch, if you're going to beat the Tampa Bay Lightning, you have to play some very sound defense. And Brendan Smith is still a risk taker, and he has limited his risk more than he has in the past this season. But down the stretch, we saw some of the old style Brendan Smith, and the Marchenko, I like it a lot, and we've talked about it on previous Red and White Authorities. My feeling is that Marchenko is a young player who understands his limitations. He doesn't try to do too much, and in his case, trying to prove himself, he's not going to try to overstretch to make a play. He's going to make the simple play, and I think that's what the Red Wings need against the Tampa Bay Lightning. These are 2 puck possession teams, and the Lightning are going to have the puck probably more than the Red Wings. They've got 2 just outstanding lines. The Stamkos line is considered the top line, but really the Palat and Tyler Johnson line, that's been even a better line. They've been one of the more consistent lines in the NHL this season. So the Red Wings have to play solid defense, and of that group that's been playing for the Red Wings, Brendan Smith is the biggest risk taker. So he seems like a logical decision to put him out. They'll evaluate how Marchenko plays. I think he's going to play pretty well. I think they're going to look at him and they're going to say, look, he made the right play, every time. And you just brought it up, but they're having yet another right shot. And this is a younger player, but let's also remember that he played in the KHL, which is a high-profile league. The talent isn't of NHL caliber, but it's covered like the NHL over in Russia. So there's a heavy attention being paid to the players. The games are televised. The media coverage is strong. So he's accustomed to playing in big-time games, and for that reason, I think it's a little bit different than most younger players stepping in the lineup. But I think this is a good decision, and we haven't seen the last of Brendan Smith. The one thing I would say about Brendan Smith is, I think when they drafted him and when they watched him, the thought is that he was going to have more of an offensive upside. If you're going to be a risk taker, and he is, then you have to take those risks in the name of offensive, making offensive plays, and he really has not been a point guy. And so I think for that reason, if you start looking to take guys out, well, you're going to take out a risk taker who's been more of a defensive guy than an offensive guy, as opposed to the other guys who have different strengths. I mean, obviously Eriksson is the big guy on defense. Quincy is a considered a veteran guy. A little more size than Brendan Smith. Meanwhile, you have DeKaiser, who is the kind of the up and comer, the skater. Again, a little bit bigger guy. So Brendan Smith is the logical guy to take out.
Well, it'd be kind of weird the summer this year for the Smith family if both Riley and Brendan somehow both get traded, because that's kind of kind of rumored, or if they're traded for one another. But I'm not sure the Red Wings would trade for Riley Smith. Not that he's not a good player. Kevin, looking at some of the things in practice today, and we'll get back to the defense and break that down. Justin Abdicator is going to be a game-time decision. And Mike Babcock said based on that, or that's what speculation is, he's not sure if he's going to break up Pavel Datsyuk and Henrik Zetterberg in this game. However, if Abby can go, they're pretty much thinking that maybe he is going to break them up, and that the odd forward out, or it seemed like today in practice, who was just filling in and not really on a sustained line, was Teemu Pulkkinen, which is kind of not that much of a surprise since he's a rookie. But with that said, Datsyuk and Zetterberg, and the Red Wings, when they needed to win some games, they put those two together and they produced. And, Z wasn't having a great, especially goal scoring, but wasn't, a lot of people were questioning where he's been. We've talked about it on previous Red and White Authorities where he was saying, he kind of called himself out. You're Mike Babcock. If Abby's in, do you split them up? Do you have Datsyuk and Zetterberg on two separate lines, or do you try to steal a game in Tampa and keep those two together?
I think you sort of experiment and see what works best. I'd be more inclined because they played so well. You're going to have to score some goals to beat the Lightning. I don't think there's any question about that. And Datsyuk and Zetterberg play well together. And so you might start out and see what happens. You see how the second line kind of holds together. And if they can hold their own, then you keep them together. If they can't, you're going to have to split them apart. But I think there's going to be some trial and error here. I don't think it's going to be one of those cases where you can just make a decision going into game one and expect it to hold. I think there's going to be a lot of shifting around depending on what Cooper does with his lineup. But they're playing a team with more offensive might, so you've got to err on the side of being able to prevent them from scoring, and but you also got to get the puck in the net yourself.
Well, yeah, I think it'll be interesting. Let's go to let's kind of go into kind of the matchups here. Let's begin in net. Ben Bishop, last year he didn't play. Tampa was swept in the first round. They're chomping at the bit. Steven Stamkos, that's all we hear about. Stamkos has been waiting for this playoff series for 82 games, and now here it is. Bishop didn't play. Bishop's in. I like Ben Bishop. I think he's a very, very good goaltender. I do remember, I'm old enough, I guess, because it seems like it was like forever ago. I don't know how old he is, but he's got to be pushing 30. That he was with the St. Louis Blues, and all they kept saying Ben Bishop's in the net. My God, is he a monster? This guy's 6'7". And that was about the extent of his St. Louis career, was how tall he was. But he is a good goaltender. But I guess it's what I call the foxhole mentality. You don't know what you're going to get until he actually jumps in that foxhole and starts playing, right?
Well, when he jumps in that foxhole, half his body's still going to be sticking in.
That's right.
He does not fold well, into a foxhole. And his size is a big issue. He takes up a lot of the net. But he's really solidified that position, and this is one of the several exceptional moves that Steve Yzerman has made. And there's a lot of confidence in Bishop. I was down in Tampa, not so long ago, and was doing a couple of pieces, and the impression I had from talking to players is they have great faith. Like they really believe, had Bishop been healthy last year, that they would have had a shot of winning that series against Montreal.
You're right about that. Obviously, that is the feeling. Even up here in Detroit, that's the feeling. I can feel it even up here. That's definitely how they feel.
Well, and I think, if you're going to size up this series in goal, you have to give the advantage to the Tampa Bay Lightning. Bishop has owned the net. He hasn't lost the net, has performed at a high level, had one period or two of inconsistency, but for the most part has really had a strong season. And they just really like the stabilizing effect he has on the defense. He works well with the defensemen. He's very popular with his teammates. They're pretty pleased with how this has worked out for him. But Vasilevsky, who's that's their version of Mrazek. Like, there are people around the league, you can find scouts who think that Vasilevsky could end up in the top 5 goalies in the league at some point. Like, he's going to be pushing Bishop at some point, and not so distant future. I mean, we could have sort of a repeat of what we have in Detroit, except for Bishop, could even be playing better than Howard was, and still getting pushed, because that's how good this Russian kid is.
I'm going to throw this in here, although I know people, you're breaking the game down, but a lot of the Lightning played for the Syracuse Crunch 2 years ago. A lot of the Red Wings played for the Grand Rapids Griffins 2 years ago. They met in the final for the Calder Cup, with the Griffins actually winning. Does that translate at all? Because I can't remember, and forgive me everyone, but I'm going off the top of my head. But at one time this season, it might not be for this playoff, there were 10 or 11 guys on the on both rosters combined that had played against each other for significant periods and played in that playoff series. Is any kind of carryover at all to that? Meaning, and I guess I'm looking at Nyquist, Tatar, who was, I think, the MVP of that Calder Cup final. Fellas that we're looking at, Riley Sheahan, that have at least performed against maybe not the Tampa Bay Lightning, but against some of these guys, and did very well a couple of years ago in the playoffs. I know it's a total fan question, Kevin. You know what I mean?
Well, it certainly helps that they're going to know these guys. They've had enough games with them that they're going to know tendencies. So, that's important. And, the Lightning believe strongly that the fact that Cooper grew up with this team, it really helps them. Like Cooper had a lot of the younger players when he was coaching in the minors, and, he knows them well. He's very comfortable with them and knows their strengths and their weaknesses. So I think that's probably a bigger factor than the fact that these guys, kind of know each other from playing against them. But, the Lightning are sort of an intimidating team now because they can fill the net. But I'm reasonably confident that Nyquist and Tatar and Sheahan, don't view them as intimidating. Like,
right.
They're just guys that they've, played against, before. So, it's. I can't say that's probably going to be a big factor.
Well, but let me ask you this, Kevin, based on what you said. I mean, will we see, Jeff Blashill being snuck into the Red Wing room at any time, maybe to fire up some of these young guys? Nothing against you, Babs, but he actually won with that group of guys.
Well, I did actually say to Cooper when he was talking about the advantage he felt he had from coaching there, that I said, I should pass that along to Jeff Blashill in case Babcock does indeed leave, so he can lay that out in front of Kenny Holland that, Cooper says, when you grow up with that team, it's easier when you get to the NHL, because I'm sure Blashill would like to make that case as well, because if Babcock leaves, Tatar, Nyquist, Mrazek, all of these guys were his guys, and they were quite successful with them. So, that would certainly play a role.
Well, we've talked about it. Obviously, the top line led by Steven Stamkos. The second line, Tyler Johnson, Kucherov, I believe, and Palais. They're not the biggest guys, but, obviously the way the games are called and the rules today, they stretch the ice is the best way to put it. That second line, and they're all have at least 20 goals, and they're as far as points per line, I mean, they're right up there with the leaders in the NHL. You look at the Red Wings, obviously, Abby has had a great year. Zetterberg on the first line. Is it going to be Nyquist up there as well? You've got that Suk, Tatar, whom we like, Riley Sheahan, Darren Helm, whom we keep forgetting to mention, who is obviously a big part of it, especially in the series because he's so quick and so fast. He scored a great shorthanded goal against Carey Price. With all that said, I look at the forwards, and I'm thinking, and maybe I'm dreaming here, and because you've made me a believer in that fourth line. I'm a big Luke Glendening fan now. but
he didn't get his 20 this year, but it's gonna come. He's gonna get 20. Just one season.
You know what? He will, and when that happens, Kevin, hopefully we're together, because I think we're gonna have a celebration like we just won the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, exactly.
But with that said, I look at it. And if Nyquist and Tatar and Riley Sheahan can learn from what happened last year against Boston, am I crazy to believe that just perhaps, if you look at the forward core, because most people would say distinct advantage Tampa, your young guys come through for Detroit, maybe it's kind of even.
I think you can make that case. The keys to this series from the Red Wings perspective are the performance level of those three players. Like, I think we can count on Datsuk and Zetterberg being who they are. I think we know that Helm is an X factor. We know that Abdicator now helps in addition to bringing some size and some grittiness. It also brings some goals. What we don't know is, are Tatar and Nyquist ready to take that next step and be big-time playoff performers? That, obviously, last season, Nyquist in particular, had a hard time adjusting to a little tighter checking. But to me, it wasn't that he wasn't capable of doing. He just didn't have the experience, because it does require some knowledge of how to work through that checking. The schemes are more sophisticated. They're more relentless. There's more one-on-one checking and defensive, attacking. And I think because of that, Nyquist just wasn't able to figure it out. So, if those three players rise up and play at the level they did when they were at their best in the regular season, then I agree with you. I mean, I think they have the skill to compete with Tampa Bay. There's no Stamkos. Stamkos is a real difference maker. Datsuk, has the reputation of that, but he's not like Stamkos, who can, have a 3-goal game, a 4-goal game. Datsuk is a different kind of magical performer. He scores big goals at the right time, but I think they're capable. I've said continuously that. If the series was played 10 times, I think the Red Wings would win it 2 or 3 times, and Tampa Bay would win it 7 or 8 times. So all you have to do is be one of those 3 times. And I think you do that with simple defensive play and those 3 players, stepping up and playing at a high level.
Well, let's look. I jumped from goalie right to the forward core. Maybe because at times I wanted to forget about the Red Wings defense. But let's go there. Marchenko's in. He's stabilizing. Zidlicki has played very well, really, since he's come over. I mean, he's gotten some points. He's the right-handed shot. Cromwell is the Red Wings' best defenseman. He's a stabilizing force. Johnny scares the heck out of me. Jonathan Ericsson. I'll be honest with you. DeKaiser, I think he's steady. He's probably going to improve. And Kyle Quincy, he is who he is. He's not flashy, but I think he's more than adequate. So then you look at Tampa side, they're pretty big. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's a wash. I think I'm actually leaning towards Tampa being better because of Victor Hedman. But what do you think? Oh
yeah, no, they're better. And it's not just Hedman; it's Stralman as well. And Matt Carl is a good puck mover. They're much more mobile than they were a year ago. That's the real big difference on the defense. And when the last season, when they reviewed where they were at, the 2 places where they really thought they wanted to make some inroads was finding more guys with playoff experience and getting more mobility on their defense. And they did that with bringing in Stralman and bringing in Brian Boyle, both of whom were in the Stanley Cup Finals. Stralman and Boyle have played like 50 playoff games in the last 3 seasons. These are guys that know what to do, and I thought those were great acquisitions. And Stralman has had just an exceptional season, just exceptional. And I think he really found a good fit there with Cooper, who gives him a lot of offensive freedom, and he's been very strong defensively as well. And I think Hedman, had he not been hurt, would have been in the Norris Trophy debate. I think he was playing at a pretty high level, and then he got hurt, and he kind of lost some momentum. But from the Red Wings perspective, I think the key is that first pairing. Cronwall and Erickson have to be airtight defensively, and Cronwall has to be good on the power play, and he has to be able to get that puck and move that puck up to the forwards. And they need him to have. They don't have a Drew Doughty type of defenseman, but they need Cronwall to be at his best, and he has been. Like Cronwall's had some magical offensive moments this season, and I think he's actually played a more consistent defensive game than he's had in other seasons. And Erickson has, let's just say, been too big of a risk taker this season to suit many fans, including yourself.
Yes.
Yeah, but they just need him to, play a steadier game in this. I mean, if I was Babcock, I'd set the defense down and just remind everybody, we can't win if you guys make too many mistakes. So you guys have to limit your mistakes and play a more conservative style.
Let's, one defenseman we haven't talked about that Steve Yzerman traded for, and I know he's hurt, but I think he's coming back. And, last I read that he's making great, is Braden Colburn, who gives them really a kind of an abrasive edge,
Yeah.
So, I mean, you throw him in there, plus with the skill that they have back there, and I'm not sure that the Red Wings have anybody that 1 through 6 that can match it, and because of that, I just think that you're right. I think that Nicholas Cronwall is going to have to play his best hockey, and he's capable of doing that. He usually does give you everything he has. But, the guy, again, I mean, Jonathan Ericsson just scares me. I mean, I just don't know his decision-making process, but we'll see how it shakes out. Kevin, let's move to the to how we see this series. Now, I know you have fans all over the country, and because you're a Detroit guy, no more so than here in Detroit, and I think we've already read your predictions in USA Today, what you think is going to happen. But for those that are watching us, our European audience, and it's vast, let's talk about it. I think the Red Wings have a chance in this series. I really do. I think that Mrazek and net. I think they have confidence in Peter Mrazek. Not that they don't have confidence in Jimmy Howard, but I think what the Red Wings have confidence in is Mrazek's puck handling ability, and I also think they have confidence in him not giving up the soft goal or coming out of nowhere. There's that Montreal goal. It looked like after the first goal, the last 3 that Jimmy let in. That the team's got to be thinking something when all the guys are kind of like looking up into the crowd, kind of shaking their head like, what the heck happened here? And, I think that the Red Wings are going in feeling good about themselves and confident, and most importantly, because we talked about this, when the Red Wings came back from that 6-game road trip, and, I guess with their record against the Western Conference, too bad they're not in the West for the playoffs, but we're going to get into these matchups in a second. But with that said, I mean, I look at it and I think that, their trouble started when goaltending started to falter for them. And then, you don't have confidence, and then you don't trust each other, and then it's kind of like a ragtag outfit. And the Red Wings were going down ragtag lane here for a while. I think now that they've given it to Mrazek and they say he's number one, it's the playoffs. Red Wings are a veteran team. They have great leadership. That I see this going 7 games. I really do. And if Mrazek is still in net, I like his chances against Ben Bishop, because he's played big games. So I'm going to still pick Tampa in 7 because I want Steve Yzerman to continue to talk to me. But no, in all seriousness, I think when it's all said and done, I look at this like a couple of years ago in Chicago where they lose 2-1 in overtime or something. I think this is going to be a good, fun, exciting series. I don't think you're going to have too many 2-1 games. This is going to be, the ultimate dream of Paul Coffey. A lot of goals being scored in this playoff series. I see Tampa taking it in 7 games.
Well, it was before you said that Steve Yzerman, wants to win this series in 4 games. Actually, I think he wants to win it in 3. I think he wants to win a best of 7 in 3 games. Because he's just the ultra competitor. But this is what I would say about the Red Wings. Their last 3 or 4 weeks were as messy as I can remember in a long time. and they were totally out of sync. Their goaltending is an absolute mess, and yet they had a 100-point season. When you look at it on the on balance for what they did for the entire season, they had a good season. They really did have a good season, and Tatar and Nyquist proved that they weren't one-hit wonders. They're going to be quality players for a long time. Datsuk and Zetterberg, despite some the scoring drought that the Zetterberg analysts still showed, their numbers were very good. We saw Abdicator develop another layer to his ability as well. Helm showed how dangerous can be when he can stay in the lineup. And there is a lot to like about this Red Wing team, and I agree. I mean, I think, as I said before, I think they have the opportunity to win this series. But Tampa Bay is a very good team, and they're the number one scoring team in my opinion. They're just more dangerous. They have more weapons. Cooper does a good job with this team. He lets the horses run. He knows when to pull back on the reins. They've vastly improved their defense. It's a much superior defensive group. Last year they were trying to win with, the immobile Sammy Salo, who was a good player in his prime, but had become a pylon late in his career. And Brewer, who got bounced around this season right. As well, just because again he had mobility issues. They're just a much quicker defense, and last year they had Bishop injured when they needed him most, and now Bishop is healthy. They've got a backup goalie, as I mentioned before, who if Bishop got hurt, I don't think it would really diminish anything. He's a heck of a goalie. And they can beat you a lot of different ways. So I'm taking Tampa Bay. I agree with you that I think it's possible Detroit can win, but I'm taking Tampa Bay, in 6 games, and I think it's going to be a great series.
Wow, now if it happens in 6, that means that they would defeat Detroit at Joe Louis Arena. I wonder up there because the way Joe Louis Arena is, you can see where quote unquote Stevie will be sitting and all eyes will be on him, and I'm kind of wondering what kind of celebration he would have, considering that just a few feet away, his jersey or his number's hanging in the rafters at Joe Louis Arena. I think it would be an awkward situation. I think he might it might be a little understated celebration as he has to walk through Ken Holland and drapes and the gauntlet and stuff like that. But I agree with you. I mean, he wants to win this. I mean, I haven't really even heard him talk too much about facing the Red Wings. I think he's probably tired of it already because every time he comes to Detroit, that's he's constantly, it's tough, I guess, for him. And I have empathy for him because if you're one of the greatest, he's, I believe the second greatest Red Wing, although he'll tell you he's the, if he has to give himself a number, he thinks Nick Lidstrom is the second greatest Red Wing behind Gordie Howe. But he's let's put it this way, Steve. You're in the top 4, all right? Let you can place yourself there. I don't know if this is exactly what he wanted to have happen. I mean, when he took this job, Detroit was still not in the Eastern Conference, and I guess if they're ever going to move east, you don't think that a couple of Florida teams are going to be in their division. So, I mean, I think this is just I don't think he's torn up. I think he wants to win, but I also think that this has got to be a kind of an odd feeling for him.
Oh, for sure. I mean, he has the greatest respect for Mr. and Mrs. Ilitch, and it's mutual. And, that's what I said. I recently said on a radio show that, how good Ken Holland is? Ken Holland is so good as a general manager is that he's the only reason why Steve Yzerman isn't the general manager of the Detroit Red Wings. Because if Holland wasn't in that chair, the Ilitches would have handed this team over to Steve Yzerman because the Ilitches knew that Steve Yzerman was going to be a great manager. They had, spoken to him through the years. They respected, what he thought about the team. Both Devellano and Holland had always consulted him, got his opinions on things because they value him. I remember hearing a story about when they were talking about face-offs and someone not paying attention to what Steve Yzerman had to say, and Ken Holland calling him aside and saying, "Hey, when Steve Eisman talks about face-offs, we all listen," you know, and you know, so like I think everybody kind of knew that Eisman was going to be successful, and everybody wished he was going to do it in Detroit. But you know, when you have a guy like Holland who is as accomplished as him, you know, it just wasn't possible. So it's hard for everybody. It won't be easy for the Illiches to watch this either, because they have such great respect for him, and I think it just, you know, it makes it difficult. And you know, fans are going to see it as a fun thing, but I don't think it's going to be fun for either the Red Wings or the Tampa Bay Lightning in terms of behind the scenes. And if I had to guess, depending on what happens, if it's an overtime game, Steve Eisman will be up in the press box. But if they got a lead, he'll be down in the dressing room waiting for his players. That would be my.
You know what? You're probably right about that. I agree with you. He's probably not going to want to be seen publicly, and I think if he is corralled by the press after something like that, if the Red Wings are eliminated on their home ice, I think he would probably be gracious in victory. To say the least. Although,
yeah, he run, as you know, Steve Eisman has a stealth mode. You know, he'll get out of Joe Louis Arena without speaking to the press, just because, you know, he won't want to gloat if they win. He will not. You know, that's just not his style. And you know, people are going to want to talk about the worst subject imaginable for Steve Yzerman is Steve Yzerman. Like, he is terrible talking about himself. And you know, and he's not an I type of guy, right. So you know, that won't be fun for him. You know, I would be surprised that he would speak if he beats the Red Wings, because he would not want to come across as gloating.
Right, and I know if you talk to the officials involved, they go, well, we talk to Stevie all the time, and he asks us for our advice. I'm not so sure, although I don't think you would call them. It'd be kind of interesting. Hey, Kenny, how do you counter this this thing that you're doing? You know, I don't think he's gonna. You know, maybe Jimmy D. You never know. Stevie, I love you. I've known you since you were a teenager. Sure, you can beat us this way, but you know, Jimmy, I'm just teasing. You know that. Yeah. It is intriguing. It's intriguing, and it would be more intriguing if Steve talked a lot, which he doesn't. So we're sitting here speculating on what we think may or may not happen. Kevin, real quickly, I want to get into the Toronto situation because Mike Babcock is, I guess, now signed, sealed, and delivered to the Leafs, depending on who you talk to. Real quickly, let's look at the series, and they begin tomorrow. Let's begin with the Islanders and Capitals. Islanders are a strange team this year. It looked like they were going to run away, maybe be the top team in the East, maybe the President's Trophy winner. Halak kind of went off the rails, but and they've and Trotz has done a great job with Washington, and Ovechkin is playing two ways, and he still gets 50 goals. He's feeling good about himself. But, man, I just think that a player like John Tavares this is it for him, you know? I mean, he has a really good team. No one really knows who the guy is unless you're a hockey fan. I'm liking the Islanders in this thing. Am I nuts?
Nope. I got him in 7, and I got Tavares scoring the Game 7 overtime goal. I think this has fallen below the radar here in terms of this could be the most entertaining series out there. You have a Washington Capital team that now is very comfortable playing in one-goal games. They've got Barry Trotz, who has taught them how to be successful when you're playing in a tight checking game. You have a rejuvenated, re-energized Alex Ovechkin, who just had a 650th goal season, and he's feeling really good about the team. And this Islanders team, this is not your older brother's Islanders team. This team can score a lot of goals, and they've got, in addition to Tavares, they got Okposo, they got Strom, they got Brock Nelson. Franz Nielsen is one of the more underrated players in the NHL. This is a team that can score some goals. I think they led the NHL in shots on goal, if I'm not mistaken. And they put the puck to the net. And the Capitals play a much stronger defense than they have before, so that'll negate that a little bit. And the Washington's offense is quite good as well. I mean, Backstrom and Tavares, the two top centers, were second and sixth in scoring. So that's quite a matchup that they have there. I think this is going to be just a great matchup. And Halak has been the goalie that they expect him to be. I remember talking to Kyle Okposo in September, And he said when they made that acquisition of Halak, he went and he looked up the save percentage of Halak just to make sure he was right. And when he read what his career save percentage was, he realized they were going to be fine because he knows that over the last few years the Islanders goalies just didn't make enough saves, and Halak does make enough saves. And Holtby has had a good year. This is a great series, and I agree with you. The Islanders are going to win it.
All right, let's go to the hottest team in all of the land, maybe the hottest team in the history of the NHL if you listen to our good friends south of the Detroit border in Canada, that the Canadiens and the Senators, Hamburglar versus Carey Price. If Max Pacioretty can come back, and I'm hearing, yeah, he's coming back or he feels good, he's out on the ice, but the concussion syndrome, nobody knows where he's going to go. This is a team that has trouble scoring goals. That Stone kid is, the second coming of Wayne Gretzky the last couple of weeks. I can't believe it because Carey Price is so good, but if the Hamburglar keeps it going, I think Ottawa can upset Montreal.
I picked Ottawa. There's always an upset in the first round, and this one's mine. And it's not about the playoffs are all about goaltending. So I'm going against the top goalie in the league right now. But the Senators had solved Price all season. His save percentage against them during the regular season was below 900. And even before the Hamburglar, they had found a way to beat Montreal. And Montreal has trouble scoring goals. And the Senators' defense is pretty good. And as long as Hammond doesn't get troubled by the Montreal spotlight, I think they can win this series. And I've picked the Senators to do that.
All right, let's go to the Blackhawks and Predators. Nashville's had a good year. It seemed when they hadn't lost back-to-back games, and then suddenly they lose a game, then they lose to Detroit on their home ice. That's the first time they lost back-to-back all year, and they haven't been the same team since. Pardon me, I have a bit of a cold here. Excuse me. But let's. I can't go against the Blackhawks. I don't know if Patrick Kane, if he's going to play or not, or if he's just toying with us. Who knows with that screwball? But and I mean that affectionately for Patrick Kane. You got the kid's something else. He cracks me up, but. I got to go with the Blackhawks against the Predators. As good as the Predators have been this year, at one time they were the number one team in the league, at least point-wise. Everybody was the surprise of the league. Peter Laviolette has done a great job, but with all that said, I can't go against Chicago.
Well, I agree again with you. I mean, I think the Predators had an exceptional year, and their scoring depth is greater than it's ever been, and their defense. I mean, my gosh, Shea Weber, who's a Norris Trophy candidate. Well, Roman Josi actually had a better season, in my opinion, than Shea Weber. So they got two guys like that. And Cody Franzen has been added, Matthias Ekholm, and Seth Jones, who is all-star caliber, and Ryan Ellis, who played over in
Windsor.
I mean, these are, I think it's probably the most skilled defense out there, in the postseason. It's really good. But the big difference is this. Mike Ribeiro has had an incredible season. He really rekindled his career after being, dropped unceremoniously by the Arizona Coyotes. But, he's their number one center. So when you look at Taves versus Mike Ribeiro, I give the edge to the Blackhawks, and then Patrick Kane. Is he 80%? Is he 90%? Well, 80 or 90% of Patrick Kane is just exceptional, and that's why I'm giving the Blackhawks the edge, because Kane's coming back, and because I like the Taves versus Ribeiro matchup.
All right, let's go to the last game tomorrow night. Will be another all-Canadian team, two Canadian teams. The love and pride of Western Canada, shall we say, the Calgary Flames, and I will say Calgary because they're playing the Vancouver Canucks. I think the sexy pick here is Calgary, pardon me, is Calgary, just because of the way they did it. They came out of nowhere. But let's be honest here. Who saw this from the Vancouver Canucks? And I know Eddie Lack or Ryan Miller and Nat. I'm going Canucks.
Wow. Well, we're going to disagree on this because, I think it's a time we give the Calgary Flames some credit. This started you know, they played this well all season, and everybody thought they were about to falter, and they never did. But they were playing this way at the end of last season. It was the same kind of deal where, and after Mark Giordano went down, everybody thought, okay, well, this is where they collapsed. No, you know, they still had a winning record. Bob Hartley's done a terrific job. This team is hard to play against. Chris Russell set an NHL record, 280-some block shots. And I don't think the Sedins are going to be able to get the puck to the net because, you know, he's just going to be a door in front of the net. It's like they got two goalies. You know, there's Russell and Jonas Hiller. So I'm taking the Flames to win this series. I think it'll be an interesting series, but I think the Flames are better than people realize they are.
Well, you know, I agree with that. It's just that I guess I've had Calgary up to here. I mean, and you know, and Yuri Hudler, who I think we all knew was a good player here in Detroit, but you know, and I guess if Ken Holland looks at it, maybe signing Michael Samuelsson instead of Yuri Hudler might not have been a good thing. But you know, but who knows? Hudler may never have reached where he's at right now with Calgary if he was still in Detroit, because of all the young forwards. But it'll be a good series. I just think with Eddie Lack or Ryan Miller, I really like the job the Canucks did this year. And Radim Vrbata, whom I believe has really always been kind of an underrated player, always seemed to do well against the Red Wings when he was with the Coyotes. You know, I think it's going to go 7. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and somehow you know, in Vancouver. I think Vancouver will do it, but we'll see. I mean, I can't disagree with you, Kevin, on that one. Let's go to the Thursday night games. We won't go to the Red Wings and Lightning, but we touched upon it a little bit. The Penguins and Rangers, I guess truly if a series was only going to go 3 games, this would be it. The Rangers against the Penguins, according to everybody. But at this point, hey, the Rangers are stacked. You know, from the blue line out, this is a very deep team. This is a very good team. I can remember 4 years ago now, Chris Osgood telling me as he was making his way and, you know, telling me about this kid who played for the Ottawa 67s named Peter Mrazek. He said that the team to watch out for in the coming years is going to be the Rangers because they are a very well-balanced team. And with King Henry and net, so the way the Penguins have had it, you know, I don't think Sid Crosby would use this, Sid the Kid, but they shoot horses, don't they? This might be one of these seasons where they just want to be out of their misery, and maybe the Rangers are going to do it rather quickly.
Yeah, well, if it was a chess match, the Penguins would just resign the match. You know, because Ehrhoff, I guess I hear, will be coming back, but they've had pretty much the JV defense in. But I want to rattle off what the Rangers defense looks like now for people that haven't sort of homed in on this. You know, Dan Girardi, Ryan McDonough, Mark Stahl, all holdovers from the Tortorella regime. Tortorella taught these guys how to be just impossible to play against and be mammoth shot blockers in the postseason. You know, then you have Kevin Klein, who has really kind of come on. He's been hurt, but is due back. And then you know, you have Keith Yandel. All Red Wing fans know what he's all about. They all wanted him here because he's one of the, if not the best puck mover among the defensemen. You know, that's probably Carlson, but he was the best puck mover in the West when he was here. And then the Dan Boyle. He was their 6th defenseman. If Dan Boyle's your 6th defenseman, you're pretty good. So, you know, the Rangers are quite a speed team. They've got goaltending. They've got defense. You know, they're going to win this series pretty handily.
And we look at the Wild and the Blues. Interesting series because goaltending kind of an issue, maybe not kind of an issue with the Blues right now. Who are they going to go with, Elliott or Jake Allen? And then you look at, you know, Dubnyk, who is, you know, kind of resurrected not only his career, but the Minnesota Wild, who were, you know, pretty much tabbed a very good team, but always underachieving. I think it's, you know, I guess, I don't know what it is, and it doesn't have anything to do with Parisi and Suter turning down the Red Wings a couple of years ago. I guess I look at it, although both teams seem to be in the same thing, until you do it, I have doubts about you, but I guess I have more doubts about Minnesota in the playoffs than I do St. Louis. Really great logic here. That's why I'm going to go with the Blues in 7 games.
The Minnesota Wild have been the best team in the NHL since mid-February. Dubnyk has really brought this team together. They were just stumbling along until Dubnyk was brought in, the best midseason acquisition. But when you look at this, I went and sized it up category by category. The Blues are just a little bit better in every category. Like the Wild have been tremendous this season, offensively and defensively, but the Blues have a better offense. They have a better defense. Special teams, but more importantly, they're just harder to play against. Kyle Reeves has got 270 some, hits. The defense. Barrett Jackman's difficult. We all know what Ott is like to play against. He's just such an agitator. David Backes is just a monstrous force out there. He's a big guy with skill. They're just a load to play against, and I think that's why I'm going with the Blues. Is that they're a much better team. They're stronger. They're deeper than they were a year ago. Like Paul Stastny is a terrific playoff performer because he can win a face-off, he can play a defensive role, and he can score. And he's on their third line. So this is a real deep team. I like the Blues. I like the Blues to go a long way in this postseason.
Well, I guess when I was down there, when I used to travel with the Wings in one playoff series, it was really kind of strange. They were all about the Cardinals, and they kept the fans down there in St. Louis say, well, we just hope that the Red Wings don't embarrass us too badly. That was basically their take. Well, you don't have to worry about that anymore. I think you have a heck of a hockey club. We'll see. Finally, the Winnipeg Jets, a very intriguing team against the Ducks, the Anaheim Ducks, or formerly the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim. I don't know. I like Winnipeg because I think that they're a big, tough, physical team. With that said, I just think the Ducks, and you said it earlier, with Getzlaf and Kessler, even though there's some questions in net about Anderson for them too, I just have to go with the Anaheim Ducks to win this series in 6 games.
Yeah, I'm going with the Ducks as well. I thought the late season acquisition of Michigan native James Wisniewski, who's from Canton, like he is like an ultra competitor. Like, he's a guy that he plays with great. Yeah, he's relentless. He plays with great passion. And they picked up a sort of an understated deal. Simon Dupre from the Pittsburgh Penguins. Big heavy hitter. Like he's an offensive minded guy, but he reminds me of like Beauchemin. Like Beauchemin has some offensive ability, but he also can play a heavy game, and that's the way Dupre is. And he's a younger player, but I really like that acquisition. And I thought the Ducks made themselves harder to play against with Wisniewski and Dupre. And I like this. I like them over the Jets, even though the Jets had a remarkable season to get into the playoffs. I mean, they were another team that was overrun by injuries. I will say this about Winnipeg, though. That Andrew Ladd, Brian Little, Blake Wheeler line is one of the best lines in hockey right now. They don't get enough credit. They got everything you need in the line. Great playmaking, great speed in Wheeler, great testiness in Andrew Ladd. That's a good line. So for all fans who just want to watch a good line perform, that's one to watch.
Right, and Paul Maurice is a great coach. I mean, going back to his days when he was here in the greater metropolitan Detroit area. All right, Kevin, we're well over an hour here because we've been previewing it, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, supposedly I guess Dion Phaneuf was brooding after the trade deadline because he wasn't a Detroit Red Wing where I guess he wanted to go. That's just not going to go away until he's traded, whether it's Detroit or wherever. But Brendan Shanahan is quick about it, fires the coach, fires Nonis, the GM. Then lo and behold, our good friends in Toronto are saying this paves the way for Mike Babcock. You know Brendan Shanahan. I know Brendan Shanahan. I would be stunned if Brendan Shanahan hands over that much power to one person, meaning general manager and coach. I'm not saying that Babcock isn't going to go to Toronto, but if he does, I think he's going to go as a coach. And, we've talked about this as well. I think the reason is because he has, without question, I was wondering what was going on here, that without question, sorry, my computer was about to shut down, and I've been on the battery. I thought it was plugged in, so that's what happened there. But I think Babcock wants to set the bar for coaching. I think he's going to end up coaching somewhere, whether it's Toronto or Detroit. I'm not sure. But your take on what's going on in Toronto, do you see Babcock doing both jobs?
No, I do not. It seems to me that Brendan Shanahan, who I've watched, really grow as an NHL administrator. When he went to the league office, he changed that office from the discipline czar to the office of player safety. That was his plan. He wanted to have a different spin, a different look on it all, and he's had a similar approach to Toronto. He's gone in, he's been very calculating, and to me, it seems what he's doing, he's building a very modern, managerial office where he's going to have 3 or 4 guys. The rumor that I keep hearing, there's 2 ways of looking at it. Either he gets the veteran guy like a Babcock, old school guy who will crack the whip and get it going. But I think it's more likely that he's going to take sort of the modern approach, like trying to find the next John Cooper, and then maybe find like a newcomer to for the GM chair as well. And 2 of the names that I've heard for those 2 positions, if Babcock is staying in Detroit, is Mr. Jeff Blashill in Grand Rapids for the Toronto coach, who would be a very much like a Cooper style of coach, and in the GM chair, a guy like Pat Verbeek, who of course is Steve Yzerman's right-hand man, and has done a good job. And also Julian Brisebois, who is also one of Steve Yzerman's, like his assistant general manager, is another name that I've heard as well. So I don't think that I would guess that Brendan Shanahan has a pretty open mind about the possibilities there, and he's just going to interview a lot of guys and see who impresses him. So I think it's early in the game, and we'll see what he does.
Do you think that he would make himself the GM?
No, I don't think so. I think he's going to bring in another guy because I think he wants to kind of have the cabinet approach. There's a cabinet approach in Detroit, as you know.
Right.
That Ken Holland is doesn't abdicate any responsibility. But he likes to bring in the Mark Howes and before Jimmy Nill, Ryan Martin now as part of his cabinet, and he listens to everyone's opinion and he makes his decision. I think Brendan Shanahan is going to have a lot of input from the president's chair, but I think he wants to have that large group in place in Toronto and have a few chosen people whose voices he listens to most.
Well, we'll see how that plays out. That'll be an ongoing soap opera. You get minute-by-minute coverage if you have a Canadian dish here in the U.S. because that's, the playoffs are going on, but trust me, it's all about the Leafs. So we'll continue to follow that. All right, Kevin, I know that you're traveling. The way I'm looking at it, the way this is falling, since we did such an extensive job, maybe Friday after the Red Wings play game number 1, we'll have episode 16 of the Red and White Authority. How does that sound?
Perfect. I'll be in Nashville covering that series, and then I'm going to go to Pittsburgh and see the end there for the Penguins. It won't be quite the end on Monday, and then I'll be back in Detroit for the 2 home games. So
okay, all right, that sounds good. And unless something extraordinary happens, where we could do this before Friday, but if not, expect to see us on Friday. Kevin, it's always a pleasure. Safe travels, my friend. Enjoy the hockey, and to you out there, until we meet again. Have a safe and pleasant one. I'm Art Regner for Kevin Allen. This is the Red and White Authority. Take care. We'll see you. Bye-bye.